The emergency broadcast cut in at 6:47 a.m., interrupting a Vought Plus advertisement for a limited edition Homelander protein shake. The president, or the man currently occupying the title, stood at a podium between two flags and four men in suits who had learned not to blink on camera. The statement ran 4 minutes. The words "national security temporary measures" and "authorized personnel" appeared 11 times between them. The word "freedom" appeared once near the end, where it costs the least. By 6:51, 300 deputized superheroes across 12 states had received their activation codes. By 6:52, the Vought PR floor was already on its third pot of coffee. The city had a particular sound that morning, the hum of a place that senses a shift, but hasn't decided yet whether to panic or applaud. Helicopters. Emergency alerts pulsing on every phone within a 20-block radius. A man on the corner of 9th and 46th. Selling American flags out of a duffel bag, cash only doing the best business of his life. 40 miles outside the city, past 3 security checkpoints and a stretch of road that didn't appear on any public map, a Vought research facility was having a considerably worse morning than the rest of the country. The official designation was Site 11. Among the 12 people cleared to know it existed, it went by the drawer, because that's what the blueprints looked like from above, and because everything kept inside it was meant to stay shut. At 6:58 a.m., the drawer opened. It started with a power fluctuation in Lab C routine, enough that the night shift tech barely looked up. Then the secondary containment grid cascaded. Then the backup systems. Then the particular silence that follows a very loud sound. The silence of people who have watched something happen and are still processing whether it was real. The monitoring room's main feed flickered once and stabilized on sublevel 3. Emergency lighting had kicked in, painting the corridor the color of a low warning. For a moment, the camera showed nothing. An empty hallway, industrial tile, a row of sealed doors. Then she was there. She moved the way people move. When the destination is slightly beneath their standards, unhurried, deliberate taking in the architecture with the mild interest of someone who has walked out of worse places and expects to walk out of this one too. Well over 6 feet in heels that should have announced her on concrete and didn't. Cat earrings caught the red light. The Umbra watch sat against her sternum, still as a held breath. The glass's thin frames, dark, reflected the corridor back at itself. Her bodysuit, woven from hair made solid by craft and contract older than the building around her, absorbed the light rather than giving it back. 4 guns. 2 holstered at her hands. 2 more built into the heels, because if you're going to wear stilettos into a firefight, you might as well make the stilettos useful. She glanced up at the camera. Not a threat. Just confirmation that it was there, that someone was watching, that she had been noted. Cute. To no one in particular. Then, she kept walking. The first guard came around the corner at full sprint, weapon drawn, earpiece crackling. Trained. He planted his feet center mass aim, issued the required verbal warning at the required volume. She tilted her head approximately 3 degrees. Time didn't slow. That's not quite the right word for it. The bullet stopped being in a hurry. The guard's exhale hung where it was. The dust in the emergency light held position like it had been asked nicely. She stepped around the bullet. 2 fingers on the gun barrel, a 40-degree redirect toward the ceiling. She was 6 feet past him before time resumed. The shot punched into the concrete overhead. The guard spun, found no one where he'd aimed, found someone where he hadn't, and made the reasonable decision to back against the wall and reconsider his choices. She didn't shoot him. She kept going. The pair at the stairwell door had more warning. A full 4 seconds, which is enough time to do several things, none of which it turned out were the right things. The stairwell door opened from the inside with a sound like an exhale. By the time she reached the surface, a loading bay gray sky beginning to brighten over a distant tree line. The air carrying the particular smell of a morning that has already decided to be difficult. Sun guards were seated on the floor in various postures of reassessment. None bleeding, none dead. All of them quietly revising what they had assumed the morning would involve. She pushed through the outer door and stood at the edge of the loading bay looking at the sky. Behind her in the monitoring room, the head of security was on the phone. The call connected to Vought Tower on the second ring. "We have a situation." A pause while the other end responded. "No, not a Compound 5 leak. Not an escaped asset." Another pause longer. Someone walked out. The man on the other end of the line was silent for 3 seconds. In PR, 3 seconds of silence on a crisis call is the equivalent of a building falling down. Get me visual. Get me everything. Lock down internal footage. All of it, every angle. Prep 2 narratives. And start scrubbing employee phones at the gate before anyone walks out of that facility. A beat. Do not let a single frame touch an external line. The security chief looked at the monitoring feed. The loading bay was empty. She was already gone. In a safe house 14 blocks from the Vought Tower perimeter, 3 rooms above a dry cleaner, smelling of solvent and old takeout containers, Billy Butcher was watching the emergency broadcast on a laptop propped against a coffee can. Huey sat across from him, hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold an hour ago. Mother's Milk stood at the window with his back to the room. Frenchie had taken apart a radio on the kitchen table and was rebuilding it from memory, which was his version of thinking. Kimiko sat on the floor against the wall, watching Butcher the way she watched most things, like she was already 3 moves ahead of whatever was about to happen. 300. Didn't turn from the window. They're calling them deputies. They're calling them a standing army, just with a nicer word for it. Butcher hadn't looked up from the screen. On the laptop, the president finished his statement. The broadcast cut to a Vought correspondent outside a federal building looking grave and well lit. The chyron read, Authorized Response Initiative, Protecting American Freedom. They move fast. Huey's mug had gone cold in his hands. They had it ready. Butcher closed the laptop. That speech didn't get written overnight. The suits, the podium, the chyron, that's months of work. They were waiting for an excuse. Frenchie sat down a circuit board and looked at the ceiling. "So what do we do?" "Same thing we always do." Butcher stood stretched, picked up his coat from the back of a chair. "Figure out what they don't want us to know. Then know it loudly." Kimiko's eyes moved to the window. Turned from it a moment later. "There's something else." Had his phone out. "Got a ping from a contact at Site 11. Something happened out there about 20 minutes ago. The facility went into full internal lockdown, but it wasn't a standard breach protocol." He looked at the screen. "Someone walked out of sub-level 3 and through 6 guards without leaving a casualty." The room sat with that for a moment. "A soup?" Huey asked. "Contact doesn't know. Says the guards are fine physically, but none of them can give a coherent description of what happened." Put the phone away. "They just keep saying it was fast, that they didn't really see it." Butcher turned his coat over in his hands. He had the expression of a man doing arithmetic in his head, the kind where none of the numbers are friendly. Something walks out of a Vought black site on the same morning Homelander gets handed a country. He pulled on the coat. "That's either very good timing or very bad timing." "Which one?" Huey asked. "Don't know yet. Go find out." Outside the city was already sorting itself into the 2 categories. It always sorted itself into when Vought moved people who believed the broadcast and people who were quietly, carefully afraid to say they didn't. The flag seller on the corner had run out of inventory. 3 blocks away, someone had spray-painted "deputized" on the shutter of a closed pharmacy, and someone else had crossed it out, and a third person had circled both the original word and the crossing out and added a question mark. The morning had opinions about itself. It just hadn't decided which ones to hold yet.
Alright, so we just finished chapter 1, and I must say wow, cause Vought is trying to take over the whole country with this new army of superheroes. But the craziest part is definitely that mystery woman. She literally slowed down time and walked right past armed guards without even trying. I mean, who wears heels to a gunfight and still wins? The boys are already onto it, and you know Billy Butcher is plotting something big. Do you guys think this new girl is a regular soup or something totally different? Drop your theories in the comments below, cause I am seriously hooked right now. Let us jump right into the next part and see what Vought does next.
The meeting started at 9 and ran 40 minutes over schedule, which in Vaught's PR department meant someone was about to have a very bad quarter. Ashley Barrett stood at the head of the table with the posture of a woman who had not slept and was not going to mention it. The wall behind her displayed 3 screens, one running NN on mute, one showing a still frame from Site 11's external camera, a loading bay, a door in absence where someone had been, and one with a slide deck titled Asset Integration Phase 1. The font was clean. The margins were precise. Someone had spent 3 hours on this at 4 in the morning. What we have? Ashley's clicker hand was steady, is an opportunity. The room waited. An unaffiliated, uncontracted, extremely visible individual with demonstrable capabilities performed a public-facing action at a Vought-adjacent facility. We own the location. We own the footage. We own the story if we move in the next 6 hours. A man 2 seats down raised a hand. Legal. They always raise their hand. The liability exposure on Vought adjacent is being managed. Ashley moved to the next slide without looking at him. Messaging framework. She is an international hero. Visiting consultant. Existing relationship with Vaught's Global Outreach Division. She clicked again. What she is not in any headline, on any platform, under any circumstance, is a witch. She is not a demon. She is not supernatural. She is not unexplained. Another click. She is extraordinary. There is a difference. One sells, one panics. The legal man wrote something on his notepad. Phone collection at Site 11 is already done. The woman running digital pulled up a map on her laptop, traffic camera locations, a 3-block radius marked in red. 43 devices. We own the master every internal angle, every timestamp. The leak is a separate problem. Anything raw that escaped before a lockdown, we're tracking now. Any clip surfaces on an external platform, I want the account and the IP within the hour. She looked up. Any footage that leaves this building goes through editing first. Anyone who thinks their personal cloud backup is an exception is welcome to test that theory. Ashley moved to the final slide. It showed a stage layout. Podium left of center. Lighting rig above. A logo space, Vought blue placeholder text where a name would go. Hero reveal, tonight, 8 p.m., VNN carries it live. Satellite feed to 14 affiliate stations. She set down her clicker. We have one shot at defining her before she defines herself. So I need everyone in this room focused on one thing. What does America need her to be? Nobody mentioned that they hadn't asked her yet. Gank, 2 floors up and 40 minutes later, Homelander stood in front of a monitor bank in his private viewing room and watched the Site 11 clip on loop. External camera loading bay, the door swinging open. A figure stepping through. The way she moved, He'd watched it 11 times. He picked up his coffee, set it back down, picked it up again. She's trending. The aide near the door had the survival instinct of someone who had learned exactly how much information to front-load. Hashtag is already at I can read. Homelander didn't look away from the monitor. A pause. Of course. On the screen, the door opened again. The figure stepped through again. Homelander turned away, walked to the window and looked out at the city that was technically his now, and somehow still didn't feel like enough. Why is she the headline? The aide processed this carefully before answering. The clip went wide before the team could contain it. Organic spread. By the time I declared martial law this morning. Homelander turned back from the window. His voice was the same temperature it always was, which meant nothing and everything simultaneously. I addressed the nation. I handed 300 people the authority of law enforcement. He gestured at the monitor. And the top trend is a woman walking out of a door. It's a very unusual. Set up a meeting. He looked back at the screens. With her. Tonight before the broadcast. The PR team has her scheduled. Before the broadcast, he repeated pleasantly. I want to say hello. The aide left quickly. Homelander looked back at the monitor. The door opened. The figure stepped through. He watched it twice more, then turned the screen off. They were in a parking garage, 4 blocks from the VNN broadcast building, in a stolen van that smelled like someone had once used it to transport fish and had not sufficiently apologized for this afterward. The scanner on Frenchie's lap was pulling Vought's internal radio frequency. It required some creativity. Frenchie was creative. Hero reveal at 8. Read off his phone. VNN Live. International hero visiting New York as part of Vought's global outreach initiative. He put the phone down. They wrote that sentence with a straight face. They write everything with a straight face, Huey answered. That's the whole job. Kimiko was looking at the clip on a tablet, the Site 11 footage, the version that had made it out before the scrub. She watched it twice. Then she held up 3 fingers, pointed at the screen, then pressed both palms flat against each other in a decisive motion. 6 guards, Frenchie translated, watching her. She went through 6 guards and... He paused, reading her hands. None of them knew what happened. Kimiko nodded. Then she added something with her right hand, a slow, deliberate gesture, thumb and forefinger almost touching. Fast, Frenchie continued. Very fast. Butcher hadn't spoken for several minutes. He was looking at the PR announcement on his phone, the headshot. The approved caption, the careful language. Extraordinary capabilities. International background. Commitment to public safety. Then he looked at the garage ceiling. If Vought is doing a reveal, they've already decided what story they're telling. Which means they've already decided what story they're hiding. What story is that? Huey asked. Don't know yet. Butcher pocketed the phone. But they pulled 43 phones from that facility this morning. They don't do that for an asset they understand. He looked at the others. They do that for something that scared them. The scanner on Frenchie's lap crackled. A fragment of a radio call. Internal Vought frequency confirms she's in the building. Do not engage without authorization. Repeat, do not. Then static. The van was quiet for a moment. We're going to need someone inside that broadcast, put in. We're going to need someone inside the building. Butcher straightened. The broadcast is the distraction. The green room at VNN's flagship studio had been repurposed on short notice and showed it. The catering was expensive. The furniture was the set's regular holdover, rearranged by someone who had done their best and not quite gotten there. A PA stood near the door with a clipboard and the expression of a person who had been warned repeatedly not to make direct eye contact. Bayonetta stood near the far wall and looked at the spread bottled water, an arrangement of fruit that had given up on itself, a card reading "Welcome International Hero" in the same PR font from the morning slide deck, with an expression that could most accurately be described as the complete absence of being impressed. A woman from PR came in. Blazer, headset. The careful smile of someone who has trained themselves not to look nervous. "We are so thrilled to have you. Tonight is a huge opportunity to introduce you to the American public. We've prepared talking points." She held out a folder. Bayonetta looked at the folder. She did not take it. Just some suggested responses. The PR woman continued, undeterred because her job required this of her. "Nothing scripted. We want it to feel natural. We just find it helps to buy a doll." Bayonetta's voice was pleasant, like she was recommending a restaurant. "Dress it however you like." The PR woman's smile held for a moment on structural integrity alone. Then she lowered the folder. "I'm sorry. If you want something, you can script buy a doll." Bayonetta picked up a bottled water, examined it briefly, set it back down. "I'm not a doll." The PA near the door wrote something on his clipboard. Possibly a note, possibly a prayer. The PR woman recovered. She was good at her job. You didn't survive 4 years at Vought without a very particular kind of resilience. "Of course. We completely respect your autonomy. Perhaps we can just..." Whatever she was going to say next was interrupted by the stage manager knocking twice on the door and announcing 8 minutes to air. Bayonetta walked past the PR woman out of the green room and toward the stage. The PA flattened himself against the doorframe to let her through. The PR woman stood holding the folder and looked at the ceiling for approximately 3 seconds. The Vought equivalent of a silent scream, and then followed. "Down." The broadcast set was built to manufacture comforts from lighting. 2 armchairs arranged at the angle of people who are about to have a candid conversation, a backdrop, suggesting Manhattan at night without the inconvenience of actual Manhattan. The host, Kyle Reston, 9 years at VNN teeth, that made Huey uncomfortable from the parking garage monitor, stood up as Bayonetta walked onto the set and extended his hand. She shook it. 1 pump. She sat in the armchair on the left. The audience, invited, pre-screened, given instructions on applause timing, did what they were there to do. VNN's chyron read, "Extraordinary Ally Vought welcomes International Hero." "Thank you so much for being here." Kyle's voice was the one he used for segments that were supposed to feel spontaneous. "America is really, I think people at home are really excited to meet you tonight. Can you tell us a little about yourself, where you come from? What brings you here?" "Hunting. A Bayonetta." Kyle's smile recalibrated. "Hunting. Can you expand on that?" "Not particularly." A beat. The audience laughed, uncertain whether that was the cue. Kyle laughed too because it was professionally necessary. "Well, we've seen some remarkable footage of you in action. Vought has been very generous in sharing..." She crossed one leg over the other, unhurried. "What footage did they share? The other Site 11 arrival? Which version?" Kyle's smile didn't move, but something behind his eyes ran a very fast calculation. "There's only one version You cut out the interesting parts." "Pleasant." Then she looked directly at the camera. Not at Kyle, not at the audience, at the camera, for approximately 2 seconds. Then back to Kyle. In the VNN control room, 3 people spoke 3 different things at the same time, and none of them were helpful. The incident happened 17 minutes into the broadcast. 4 men entered from the studio's public entrance on the north side. The entrance that was supposed to be locked, that had been locked for reasons that were subsequently determined to involve a magnetic door seal, that had been remotely disabled approximately 4 minutes before the men walked through it. They were dressed in civilian clothes, armed with weapons that would later be described in the official report as unregistered. 2 of them glanced down at the same spot on the studio floor before spreading out a strip of orange gaffer tape, the kind used to mark camera positions, that had been placed there sometime in the last 4 hours. One had an earpiece that the raw footage would later show clearly, though the VNN edited cut would not. They were shouting something that on the uncut audio sounded less like terrorism and considerably more like people who had been given the script slightly too recently. Security deployed. The studio shifted into the controlled chaos of a building that had a protocol for this specific scenario. Bayonetta stood up from the armchair. The first man raised his weapon and got approximately as far as aiming before she was already somewhere else, somewhere between where she had been and where he was, and the weapon was no longer in his hands, but in hers, and then bent at an angle that suggested it was no longer a weapon, so much as a comment on the concept of weapons. The second man had a better reaction time. It didn't help him in any meaningful way. 14 seconds. 4 men floor of the studio, none dead. Several things broken that had not been designed for the stresses now placed upon them. She stood in the middle of it, with her glasses still straight and her hair still exact, and looked at Kyle Reston, who had not moved from his armchair, physically incapable of flight or fight, and having located a third option, which was simply to remain seated and document. You were saying, Kyle Reston couldn't. He was going to need several days and possibly a therapist before he could say anything useful. In the control room, the director was screaming at the technical team. The live feed had caught everything, every angle, every second of 14 seconds, that Vought had not approved and could not retroactively approve. The chyron still read, "Extraordinary Ally." Nobody had thought to change it. Nobody could think of what to change it to. Cut to commercial. They cut to a Vought pharmaceutical ad. It was about blood pressure. Marsad, backstage in the narrow passage between the set and the green rooms. Ashley Barrett stood with her phone in one hand and a look on her face that people at Vought had learned to step back from. We use the approved cut. Into the phone flat. Yes, I know what the approved cut shows and what it doesn't show. Use it anyway. Any platform posting raw footage gets a copyright strike in the next 30 minutes. If the copyright strike doesn't land, I want legal on the line by the time I finish this sentence. She listened. No, I don't care what it looks like. I care what it is, and what it is our content. She hung up. Bayonetta walked past her, heading back toward the green room, with the energy of someone who has attended a mildly irritating appointment and is now free to leave. That was not the plan. Ashley flat. Bayonetta paused, looked at her. I know. Those men were supposed to be a controlled demonstration. We had cameras positioned for specific angles. The narrative was... Bayonetta considered this. Your demonstration, your men, your cameras. She tilted her head. Did you ask me? Ashley opened her mouth, closed it. Thought not. Bayonetta walked on. Ashley watched her go, then she turned back to her phone and called the one number she did not enjoy calling. It rang twice. Here's what happened. Ashley's voice had shifted into crisis mode, efficiency clipped and forward-facing. Here's what we can salvage. The raw clip is already circulating. Copyright strikes are in motion, but we have a 3-hour window maximum before it's too distributed to pull. The approved cut makes her look controlled. The real cut makes Homelander look irrelevant. A beat. Tell me what you want on air by morning. On the other end, Homelander was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was the one he used when he had already decided. I told you, set up a meeting. Nanda. In the parking garage, the van was very quiet. The feed they'd pulled from VNN's satellite uplink the unedited window before the cut to commercial was playing on Frenchie's laptop for the third time. Nobody had spoken since the first viewing. Huey broke first. That was 14 seconds. Counted, answered. 4 men. Counted that too. Butcher was leaning back against the van wall with his arms crossed, looking at the laptop screen without quite looking at the footage, looking at something behind it. They danced her out there to make her look useful. She made them look scared. That's not what they planned, which means they don't have a plan for her. He straightened. And something without a plan at Vought doesn't stay without a plan for long. They'll move to control. Hard. Probably by morning. Kimiko had not taken her eyes off the laptop. She pointed at the screen at the moment where Bayonetta stood in the middle of the studio, 4 men arranged around her, and looked at the anchor. Then Kimiko looked at Butcher and made a gesture with both hands, palms up, a small shrug, the universal sign for what is that? No idea. Butcher reached over and closed the laptop. But Vaught's terrified of it. A beat. Which means we need to find out before they figure out how to bury it. The room on the 43rd floor of Vought Tower was not technically a meeting room. It was what the interior design brief had called a leadership interface space, which meant it had better lighting than a boardroom and worse furniture than a penthouse, and was used primarily when someone needed to have a conversation that shouldn't appear on any calendar. The cameras were already running when Bayonetta arrived. 2 in the corners, 1 above the door angled to catch the room's center. The kind of setup that looked architectural until you knew what to look for. A PR handler stood in the hallway outside, close enough to hear raised voices, far enough to claim she hadn't. The floor-to-ceiling windows faced west. At this hour, the city below looked like something a graphic designer had approved. Homelander was standing at the windows when she walked in. He didn't turn immediately. This was intentional. The pause was always intentional, with him calculated to make whoever entered feel they were waiting for permission to exist in the same space. He turned at the 4-second mark. His expression was the one he used for press events where he was being generous. "I've been looking forward to this," he said. The cape caught the light exactly as designed. "You've had quite a first day." Bayonetta looked around the room. The cameras, the angles, the way the light fell on the center of the floor like a mark on a stage. Nice setup. She walked to the windows instead of the center, which was not where the cameras were pointed. You always redecorate for guests, or just the ones you're not sure about. Something moved behind Homelander's eyes. He let it pass. "I wanted to meet you properly, without the production value. This is less production value than the other room." He crossed toward her. The walk was practiced, wide, unhurried, the physical language of a man who has never had to wonder if he'd fit through a doorway. He stopped at a distance that was 3 feet closer than comfortable. "You're new here," he said. "I get that. New city, new circumstances. It takes time to understand how things work." He tilted his head, a gesture he'd borrowed from someone human a long time ago. "I can make things very easy for you, or I can make things very hard. That's not a threat." A pause. "It's just geography." Bayonetta looked at him for a moment with the expression of someone reading a menu they've already decided to ignore. "You rehearsed that, the 3-foot gap closed by 1 more foot. I don't need to rehearse anything." She turned back to the window. "The view's better from here anyway." Homelander's hand came down on her shoulder. The grip was the kind that bends steel, not a touch, a declaration of ownership. The kind of contact that ends conversations. The room shifted. Not visibly. Not in any way the cameras would catch cleanly, and the people reviewing the recording later would spend considerable time arguing about what exactly they were seeing. One frame, his hand on her shoulder, her facing the window. The next frame, she was 2 feet to his left, and he was facing the glass and his hand was closing on air that was no longer there. The frame after that. The window in front of him had a new crack in it, running from the lower left corner upward from the force of a forearm he didn't remember blocking. His cape was on the floor. He didn't remember it coming off. He turned around. She was standing near the center of the room, the center he'd positioned for the cameras, with the cape draped over one arm like a coat check ticket, her expression unchanged, glasses perfectly level. Looking for this? Homelander stared at her. The cape on her arm. His cape, the one with the eagle, the one that had been on his back 10 seconds ago, the one that no one had ever touched without permission. His eyes went red at the edges, the particular color they turned when the thing behind them stopped performing patience. That, he said very quietly, was a mistake. Was it? She set the cape on the back of a chair, smoothed it flat as if folding laundry. From where I'm standing, you reached. I moved. You hit your own window. She looked at him. That's not a mistake. That's just physics. The crack in the window spread another inch. Homelander laughed. It was the laugh he produced when a laugh was required and nothing underneath wanted to cooperate. You think that was something. You think I was trying. I think you were. She picked up the bottled water from the side table, the one that had been placed there for the meeting, and examined the label briefly the same way she'd examined the one in the green room. That's what makes it interesting. The laugh stopped. He was across the room in under a second. A move that rearranged the air and left the furniture slightly displaced, and his hand was around her wrist, not her shoulder this time, her wrist, the kind of grip that could end bones. And then there was a sound like pressure releasing, and his hand was empty, and she was 3 feet away, and his wrist was at an angle that would have snapped anything with a normal skeleton, and he had not seen it happen. He had not seen it happen. He looked at his wrist, back at her. His jaw was set in a way that the PR team would have recognized and immediately begun damage controlling. Don't touch the raw feed from this room. She said it to the camera in the upper corner pleasantly, as if reminding someone to water a plant. Then to him, you'll want to think about what story you're telling with this. Homelander didn't move, didn't. His eyes were fully red now, the heat behind them real, the laser already half-formed, and then something calculated clicked into place behind the fury. The thing in him that had learned over years of Vought management that some damage couldn't be lasered away, that some problems needed a different tool. The red faded, slowly, like a dial being turned. He straightened his suit, picked up the cape from the chair she'd stepped back to let him reach it without anything becoming an incident, and set it back on his shoulders in one practiced motion. You're going to need allies, he said. The voice was back to its broadcast register, smooth and level. This city isn't safe right now. I'm the one keeping it that way. He moved to the door. When you figure out that you need someone in your corner, I'll be available. He left without waiting for an answer. The door closed at the exact speed of someone who was not slamming it. In the hallway, the PR handler fell into step beside him before he'd taken 3 strides. How did it get me, Ashley? He didn't slow. Now. Ashley Barrett was on her 3rd call of the hour when Homelander walked into the crisis room. She ended the call mid-sentence, which told everyone in the room exactly what kind of meeting this was going to be. He stood at the head of the table. The cape was back in place. His expression was the flat, pleasant one, the dangerous one, the one that meant he'd already decided. Plan A. He looked at Ashley. The asset integration. The hero reveal. The international ally package. A pause. Bury it. Ashley's pen stopped on her notepad. If we reverse the narrative now, we have to explain why. I don't want a reversal. I want a replacement. He pulled out the chair at the head of the table and sat down, which he almost never did in meetings. Standing was a power position, sitting meant he intended to stay. We had a public figure perform an unsanctioned, uncontrolled action in a Vought facility. We had another unsanctioned, uncontrolled action on live air, under current martial law authority. He looked at the legal advisor. What's the classification threshold for a threat to public order? The legal advisor had the look of a person who knows exactly where this is going, and has already decided their opinion is not relevant. Under the Authorized Response Initiative, any individual demonstrating capability beyond registered SUPE parameters without Vought oversight can be designated a Category 7 threat. Homelander nodded. Unregistered, unvetted. Operating outside sanctioned channels during a national security event. He looked at Ashley. That's not a reversal. That's an update. Ashley wrote something on her notepad. The hero reveal content is already on 14 affiliate feeds. So pull it and replace it with a correction. We were wrong about what she was. Now we know better. He stood. The meeting was over. I want a Category 7 filing by 9 a.m. I want a press statement by 10. And I want the deputized response teams briefed by noon. He walked to the door. Make her a threat, he said without turning. By noon. The room stayed quiet for 3 seconds after he left, the kind of quiet that follows an order no one wants to be the first to start executing. Then Ashley uncapped a new pen and turned to a fresh page. Get me the Category 7 template, she said to the room. And someone find out how many of those clips from the live show are still up. I want numbers, not estimates. She wrote 2 words at the top of the page, underlined them once, and got to work.
Oh gosh, this chapter just delivered the ultimate showdown. Homelander tried to pull his usual scary leader routine and she completely embarrassed him. She dodged his grip so fucking fast that he ended up smashing his own window. She even folded up his famous eagle cape right in front of him. I can't even imagine how disrespectful it would be right there. You can tell Homelander is absolutely terrified because he instantly ran to his team and ordered them to label her a massive national threat. He cannot control her, so he wants to destroy her reputation.
At 9:03 a.m., VNN broke from its regular programming with a graphic that used red in the way. Red is only used when someone wants a viewer's heartbeat to do something specific. The Chiron read, Category 7 threat. Unregistered soup operating in New York. The anchor, not Kyle Reston, who had called in sick or possibly traumatized, was a woman named Dana Cho, who had 12 years in broadcast journalism and had learned in the last 6 months that Vaught's definition of journalism was closer to architecture. She read from the teleprompter with the composure of someone who has decided that composure is the only thing she still controls. Authorities are urging residents to avoid the Midtown and Hell's Kitchen areas as an unidentified individual believed to be operating as a foreign bioweapon asset continues to evade authorized response teams. Vought International, working in coordination with Federal Emergency Management, has classified the subject as a Category 7 threat under the Authorized Response Initiative. Cut to a security consultant. Salt and pepper hair, a flag pin. The practiced gravity of a man who charges $8,000 a day to look like he knows things. What we're seeing here is textbook asymmetric infiltration. This individual, and we have to be clear, we don't know who sent her or why, is demonstrating capabilities that suggest significant state-level backing. The footage is deeply concerning. The speed, the precision. The footage they showed was not the green room, not the live show. It was something else, A clip 40 seconds showing a dark figure moving through what appeared to be a residential block. Moving fast, aggressively. Someone on the ground. Whether that person had been there before the figure arrived or because of it was a question the editing had made difficult to answer. Below the clip in small text, content warning, disturbing imagery. The clip had not existed yesterday. In the PR legal suite on the 31st floor, the deepfake team had been working since 4 in the morning. They did not call themselves the deepfake team. Internally, they were Narrative Verification, which was a title that appeared on no org chart and on no business card. Version 1 is locked. The lead tech said, not looking up from 3 monitors arranged in a horseshoe. Bayonetta residential block, 2 civilian casualties. Corroborated by 2 eyewitness accounts, both generated, both backstopped with profile history going back 18 months. He pulled up a second window. Version 2. Homelander arrives, subjects are already down. He secures the perimeter. Clean, heroic, no contradictions with version 1. Ashley stood behind him, arms crossed, looking at the screens. The problem, the tech continued, is saturation. There are already 47 independent clips from last night's live show on 6 platforms. We've struck 32. The other 15 are either on servers we can't touch or have already been downloaded and reshared beyond traceable distribution. We don't need to kill them all. Ashley hadn't moved. We need people to look at 2 clips and not know which one is real. That's different. She looked at the version 1 render. Does it hold up to frame analysis? At consumer level, yes. Forensic, probably not. Nobody watching VNN is running forensic analysis. She straightened. Push both versions. Different upload sources, different accounts, different timestamps. Make it look organic. She turned toward the door. And get me the list of accounts that are still sharing the raw show clip. I want that sent to the response teams. 3 blocks from the Vought Tower perimeter on a street that had been barricaded since 6 a.m. under emergency access protocols, a man named Derek was explaining to a deputized soup that the phone in his jacket was his personal property. Derek was 26. He worked at a coffee shop on 48th. He had posted a 17-second clip of the live show the night before, because it seemed like the kind of thing people should see, and because he had 340 followers and hadn't expected it to go anywhere. It had gone somewhere. The soup, one of the newer deputized ones, Compound 5, administered 6 weeks ago, still figuring out what his limits were, took the phone without looking at Derek's face. This was how it was done. Eye contact made it complicated. Sir, under Section 14 of the Authorized Response Initiative, distribution of unverified content during a Category 7 event constitutes incitement. I was there, Derek said. I was in the audience. I filmed what I saw. The cuffs were zip ties, which was a detail that would appear in several accounts later and would mean different things to different people. Derek was walked to a white van, not the stolen fish van. A different one official with a Vought contractor logo on the side, and the door closed. And the street went back to looking like a street with a barricade on it, which is what it had looked like before. His phone with the clip still on it went into a black bag with 11 other phones. 2 blocks away, a dash cam on a parked delivery truck had caught the whole thing. The truck's owner would not discover this for another 4 hours. The clip would surface 3 days later under a different context entirely, which is the way these things tend to go. The Kite store on the corner of 9th and 51st had a security camera above the door that its owner, Mrs. Ewan, had installed after a break-in 18 months ago. It covered the sidewalk for approximately 30 feet in each direction. Mrs. Ewan was in the back room when the response team moved through. On the camera, the team first, 8 individuals, 4 in tactical gear, 4 in the blue and white of deputized soups moving in a standard sweep formation through a street that had been emptied under the barricade order. Earpieces. Long guns on the tactical side. The soups with the particular posture of people who know they can take a hit and are deciding whether they want to. Then a figure at the far end of the street where the barricade had been pushed aside with no apparent effort. The response team saw her. The formation adjusted standard convergence, the soups taking front position, the tactical element fanning to the sides. Someone on the comms said something. The response was inaudible. She was walking toward them, not away. The first soup, a man who had in 6 weeks of deputized service, developed the working assumption that speed was leverage, closed the distance at a velocity that should have been decisive. He stopped being a factor approximately 2 seconds later in a way that the camera caught, but that the camera's resolution was insufficient to fully explain. He was on the ground. She was not where she had been. The distance between those two facts had collapsed in a way that suggested the usual rules about how things move through space had been suspended briefly by mutual agreement of whatever governed such things. The second soup understood faster. He went wide, tried to circle. This also did not work. The tactical element opened fire. This was the part of the recording that would later be most heavily argued over whether the shots were aimed at her, and whether aimed was even the right word for what happened, because the shots landed in walls and pavement and one in a fire hydrant, and none of them landed where she had been by the time they arrived. 40 seconds. The response team was on the street in the configurations they would remain in until backup arrived. No fatalities. 3 fractures among the soups. The tactical element, largely unharmed physically, had relocated behind a barricade and was making radio calls in the tone of people describing something they expect not to be believed. She walked past Mrs. Ewan's kite store. The camera caught her for 3 frames before she moved out of range. In the frames, glasses straight, hair exact. Mrs. Yuan's security system uploaded automatically to a cloud server at midnight. The clip would exist in that server for 6 days before anyone thought to check. Frenchie had a contact in the response team's communication relay. Not inside it, adjacent to it, a frequency that ran parallel and could be nudged into audibility with the right equipment. He'd been nudging it for 2 hours from the back of the van, which now smelled of fish and coffee and the specific anxiety of people doing illegal things in a small enclosed space. They lost her at 51st, he said. 3 minutes ago. Team 2 is requesting medical. Team 1 is requesting to be somewhere else, I think. My French is better than my tactical radio. They pulled someone off the street on 48th. MM had his tablet out tracking arrest logs that a contact in the city clerk's office was feeding him in near real time. A practice of dubious legality that had proven useful on 17 separate occasions. Derek Osei, 26, coffee shop worker. His clip had 4,000 views by the time they got to him. 4,000 isn't viral, Huey said. 4,000 is enough to matter to Vought. MM put the tablet down. They're not just targeting reach. They're targeting the act of posting. Make enough people scared to share, you don't have to chase the clips that are already out there. Butcher was looking at a building schematic on his laptop. A converted warehouse on the west side of the barricade zone 6 months ago. It had been a textile distribution hub. Now its power draw had tripled, and it had acquired 4 satellite uplinks and a Vought contractor registration. Command and control. He looked at Kimiko. That's where the response teams are routing from. That's where the feeds are going. That's where they're keeping the phones. Kimiko was already checking the magazine on the compact she kept in the back of her waistband. She looked up and made a single gesture. Let's go. Not yet. Butcher closed the laptop. We don't go in until we know what we're looking for. Huey the arrest log. Cross it with anyone who might have had actual footage of the facility, not just the live show. Site 11 perimeter loading bay. Anything. He looked at MM. Derek Osei. Can we get him out? Depends where they're holding him. If it's the contractor van, maybe. If it's inside the building, find out. Butcher pulled on his coat. We're not going in for data and leaving people in zip ties. MM was already on his phone. Frenchie was already reconfiguring the scanner. Huey was looking at the schematic with the expression he got when the math of a situation was becoming clear, and he didn't like the total. If we go into that building, Huey said, and Bayonetta goes in at the same time for different reasons, then she goes in for different reasons. Butcher opened the van door. We're not coordinating, we're coexisting. There's a difference. In this case, Butcher opened the van door. She breaks things. We take what falls out. Send. VNN ran the version 1 deepfake at 2:17 p.m. between a segment on the Authorized Response Initiative's community safety protocols and an ad for a VOT-backed home security system. It ran for 40 seconds. The anchor said, "We want to warn viewers, this content is disturbing." The security consultant leaned forward. This is exactly what we feared. A chyron at the bottom read, "Developing Category 7 threat linked to civilian casualties." In the 14 minutes following the broadcast, the clip was shared 22,000 times. In the same 14 minutes, 11 people who had been at the live show the night before posted side-by-side comparisons, noting that the figure in the VNN clip moved differently than the figure they had seen. The posts used words like fake and deep fake and VOT is lying again. And 3 of them were taken down within the hour under copyright claims, and 4 of them weren't. And the comment sections of all 11 became the kind of argument that generates its own heat, regardless of who started it or why. By 3 p.m., the top trend on 2 platforms was a split half insisting the VNN clip was real, half insisting it wasn't. VOT's digital team read this as a success. The goal had never been belief. The goal was the split itself, the version of reality where nobody was sure, and the uncertainty did the rest of the work. In the West Side warehouse, in a room with 14 monitors and a VOT contractor who had been awake for 31 hours, a phone in a black bag began to vibrate. Then another. Then 6 more as the people who had sent texts to the people whose phones were in the bag started to wonder why nobody was answering. The contractor looked at the bag, looked at the monitors, made a note in the incident log that said personal device interference, and did not open the bag because that was someone else's department. In the same building 2 floors below, Derek Osei sat on a folding chair in a room with no windows and a VOT legal document on the table in front of him, explaining in 7 pages of dense type the provisions of Section 14 of the Authorized Response Initiative. He had not signed it. At 3:22 p.m., the lock on the door of that room was defeated from the outside by someone with a particular set of skills and a compact toolkit and a contact in the city clerk's office who had in the last 20 minutes figured out exactly which building the arrest logs were routing to. The door opened. MM looked at Derek. Derek looked at MM. "You posted the clip," MM said. "Yeah. We need the original file." MM stepped in. "The uncompressed one before you uploaded. Do you have it?" Derek looked at him for a moment with the expression of someone deciding very quickly how much trust a situation requires. "It's in my cloud backup. They took my phone, but they didn't..." He stopped. "They didn't ask about the backup." "People never do." MM handed him a burner. "Log in, download it. You've got about 4 minutes before someone notices this door is open." Derek took the burner. His hands were steadier than MM expected. 3 floors above them, Frenchie was doing something to a server rack that would take the building's outbound communication relay offline for approximately 11 minutes, long enough for Butcher to copy the arrest log database to a drive the size of a thumb, and long enough for Huey to photograph the deepfake render queue on an unlocked workstation before the screensaver kicked in. 11 minutes. They were out in 9. Ashley Barrett took the call at 4:45 p.m. in her office on the 31st floor, with the door closed and the kind of stillness that means someone is deciding how to phrase bad news. "The warehouse team is reporting a breach," the security chief said through the phone. "Non-violent, targeted. They took the arrest database and something from the render workstation." A pause. "And they pulled one of the detainees." Ashley set down her pen. "Which one?" "The coffee shop. Oh, say." She looked at the wall for a moment. Outside her window, the city was doing what it always did, moving indifferent, generating the raw material that Vought turned into narrative. The split was holding on social media. The deep fake was circulating. The Category 7 filing was live. None of that changed what had just happened to the render queue. "They have the comparison data." Not a question. Ashley looked at the wall. "Which means they can prove the VNN clip was generated." She picked up her pen again. Not to write anything, just to have something in her hand. "How long before they can do anything with it?" "If they're who I think they are, 12 hours. Maybe less." Ashley looked at the legal pad on her desk, at the 2 words she'd written that morning and underlined once. She drew a box around them now. "Then we don't give them 12 hours. She uncapped a fresh page. "If the video isn't holding, we change the story. Something bigger, something that needs her specifically." She wrote 3 words, looked at them, crossed out, one wrote another. "Get me Homelander's scheduler, and pull the file on the Vought Tower public access protocol." She looked at what she'd written. "We need her to do something we can use, or we need something she has to respond to." She put the pen down. "We don't need her dead. We need her to become a reason." The memo circulated at 6 a.m. and used the word optics 14 times. Ashley had written it herself, which meant it was precise in the way things are precise when someone has been awake long enough to stop caring about softening language. The subject line was Phase 3, Contingency Asset Scenario. The body of it, stripped of the corporate grammar, said, "We are going to put a person in a room and wait for her to either save them or not, and either outcome gives us something to work with." The content in the memo did not use that word. It used operational subject was a Vought facilities contractor named Gerald Park, 41 years old, had worked building maintenance at Vought Tower for 9 years, had been taken into protective custody 3 days ago under a Section 14 order because someone in his apartment building had posted a clip and his name had appeared in the comments, confirming it was real. He had not been charged. He had been held in a room in the West Side warehouse in the same wing where Derek Osei had spent 4 hours before E&M got him out. Gerald did not know he was bait. The memo was specific about this. Subject must present as authentic. Prior knowledge of scenario parameters would compromise evidentiary value. The cameras were already in position 2 inside the decommissioned transit depot on 43rd, where Gerald would be held, 1 on the roof of the building across the street, covering the approach, 2 in the mobile command unit parked on the access road. The feeds routed to a relay truck 3 blocks east, which routed to the VNN satellite uplink, which was live and waiting. The headline was already written. It sat in a queue on a VNN producer's workstation, ready to push Category 7 suspect kills hostage in confrontation with authorities. Written at 5:47 a.m., Gerald Park was still eating a granola bar in his holding room at 5:47 a.m., unaware that his death had already been announced, pending confirmation. Frenchie found the relay truck at 8:15, which was 40 minutes before the scenario was scheduled to go active. He found it because relay trucks have a power signature, and Frenchie had spent the better part of a decade knowing what power signatures meant and where they pointed. "Mobile uplink," he said into the comms. 3 blocks east of the depot. That's where the feed is going before it hits the satellite. "Can you cut it?" Butcher's voice in his earpiece. "I can delay it. 8, maybe 10 minutes. Not kill it." He was under the truck looking at a cable junction with a pen light between his teeth. If someone is watching the relay in real time, they'll know something's wrong in about 30 seconds. So we have 30 seconds of clean confusion. Butcher, that's enough. For what? For her to finish. Frenchie looked at the junction, looked at his watch. "You're assuming she's already there." "She was at the depot 12 minutes ago. They're on the same channel. I had eyes on the east approach. She walked past a Vought contractor unit like they were furniture." A pause on the line. "The contractor unit didn't follow her," continued. "They called it in and moved back. That's in the radio log." Another pause. "Right," Frenchie said. He put the pen light back between his teeth. "Give me 4 minutes." The depot had been out of service since 2019 and smelled like it. Concrete floors, high ceilings, the kind of dark that collects in industrial space and doesn't fully leave when the lights are on. Gerald Park was zip-tied to a chair in the center of the main floor, the chair positioned precisely the way furniture is positioned, for camera, not for comfort. 2 Vought security contractors stood at the far wall. One had a phone. He was not looking at Gerald. He was looking at the door. He had been told when the target enters, activate the secondary device on the chair. The secondary device would make a sound. The cameras would catch the sound and the target's reaction. Whatever happened next, they had footage. He looked at his phone, looked at the door. The door opened. What happened in the next 11 seconds was the subject of significant disagreement afterward, primarily because the 3 camera feeds showed 3 slightly different versions of the same event, none of which were fully coherent, and the 4th camera, the one on the roof across the street, had its angle blocked by a truck that had not been there during the location scout. Version 1 from camera left a figure entering the 2 contractors, moving a series of positions that didn't connect logically, as if several frames had been removed from the sequence without announcement. Version 2 from camera right. Gerald's chair, the zip ties, and then Gerald no longer in the chair. The zip ties on the floor. No intermediate steps visible. Version 3 from the mobile unit outside the depot door, opening and closing. 11 seconds of nothing. Then, one contractor walking out, under his own power, the other being carried out by the first. Both alive. Neither able to explain in subsequent interviews what they had seen between the door opening and finding themselves outside. Gerald Park, freed from the chair in a way he would later describe only as fast, and then it was done, was standing in the center of the depot when the lights cut out for 2 seconds and came back on. He was alone. The contractors were gone. The chair was on its side. He stood there for a moment, looked at the zip ties on the floor, looked at the door. He walked out. The command unit was a converted communications truck parked on the access road with 4 monitors and 2 operators and a direct line to the VNN relay. It was the nerve center of the scenario, the place where the feeds converged, where the decisions got made about what the satellite received. It was also, from a structural standpoint, not designed to withstand what happened to it at 8:31 a.m. The first sign was the monitors going dark, not from a power cut. The generator was still running, but because the cables connecting them to the relay array had been removed from the outside of the truck with a precision that suggested whoever did it knew exactly which cables and in exactly what order. The second sign was the door. The operators later described it as, "The door came open from the outside, and then there was a woman standing in the opening, and then one of them was outside the truck, and the other was in the corner." And neither of them had a clear memory of the transition. The relay array, 4 units, the satellite uplink hardware, 2 terabytes of buffered feed storage took approximately 90 seconds to reduce to a condition that would require full replacement, not random destruction, specific. The buffer drives were removed intact before anything else happened, which was the detail that would later matter most. The drives went into a bag. The bag left with her. The VNN producer 3 blocks away watched his uplink indicator go from green to red and then to a status his software had no icon for. He called his supervisor. His supervisor called the relay truck. Nobody answered the relay truck. The headline in the queue, Category 7, Suspect Kills Hostage, sat unpushed for 11 minutes before someone in the PR suite noticed the scenario had gone offline and pulled it manually. Gerald Park was picked up by a city bus on 44th, having walked 4 blocks in his work clothes with zip tie marks on his wrists, and rode it to the end of the line because he wasn't sure where else to go. Huey found the deepfake template directory on the second server rack, 3rd shelf, in a drive caddy that someone had labeled Archive Q3 in a font that was trying very hard to look boring. "Got it," he said, pulling the drive. The full template library. Version 1, Version 2, the source renders. He looked at the timestamp on the caddy label. These were prepped 4 days ago, before the live show, before the Category 7 filing. He looked at MMM. They had this ready before they had a reason to use it. They always have it ready. MM was at the door watching the access corridor. That's the whole point. The reason comes later. The tool comes first. Butcher was at the main terminal pulling the detention log. Names, dates, Section 14 orders, holding locations. 47 people in 72 hours. Some released, some still listed as processing. 3 with no status update since intake. He copied the log to the drive in his pocket. Then he copied it again to a second drive, because Butcher did not believe in single points of failure. "We need to go," MM said from the door. "Someone just cut the external relay." When Vought figures out where that happened, this building is the next place they look. 30 seconds. Butcher was still at the terminal. "Butcher." 20 seconds. MM looked at Kimiko. Kimiko was already in the corridor watching both directions, which was her version of agreement. They were out in 23 seconds. The door locked behind them with the polite click of a system that didn't know what had just happened to its data. The drive with the relay buffer. Bayonetta's take from the command unit surfaced 3 hours later in a way nobody at Vought anticipated. It was left at the front desk of the New York Civil Liberties Union office on 41st Street in a padded envelope with no return address, along with a printed sheet listing 47 names and their Section 14 order numbers and current holding status. The duty attorney who opened the envelope looked at the drive, looked at the list, looked at the drive again. She called her supervisor. Her supervisor called 3 other people. By 6 p.m., the list was in the hands of 4 journalists, 2 federal public defenders, and a congresswoman who had been looking for exactly this kind of documentation for 6 weeks and had begun to think it wasn't going to arrive. Vaught's legal team would spend the next 18 hours trying to determine how a buffer drive from a sealed command unit had made it to a civil liberties office and would not reach a satisfactory conclusion, because the answer involved 11 seconds of missing camera data and a padded envelope and no fingerprints. Homelander watched the relay indicator go red from his viewing room in Vought Tower. He'd been watching the scenario feeds in real time, not because Ashley had invited him, but because he had access to every feed in the building and the habit of using it. He watched the monitors go dark in sequence, watched the uplink status drop, watched the VNN headline queue visible on the secondary display, stayed unpushed for 11 minutes before someone pulled it. He picked up his phone, put it down, picked it up again. Ashley answered on the first ring. The scenario is offline. His voice was level, the kind of level that requires maintenance. We're aware. We're assessing. She didn't save the hostage. He looked at the dark monitor. She saved the hostage and then took apart the operation and mailed the evidence to a lawyer. A pause. That's not a Category 7 threat. That's someone making a point. Ashley didn't answer immediately. The bait isn't working, Homelander continued. The narrative isn't holding. The deep fakes are being challenged. He stood. If we can't define her, we can't contain her. And if we can't contain her, the only thing left is confrontation. He walked to the window. Below, the city moved indifferent. Arrange the broadcast. National, primetime. I'll be on that stage, and I want her there too. She won't agree to. She doesn't need to agree. She just needs to show up. A beat. Make it the kind of thing she can't ignore. Something public. Something with people in it. His reflection looked back at him from the glass. She cares about something. Find out what and put it on television. He hung up. In her office, Ashley looked at the phone for a moment. Then she opened a new document and typed a single line at the top. Stage event National Broadcast Vought Tower Plaza Prime Time. She looked at it, added one more line. Make it something she has to answer. The plaza outside Vought Tower held 4,000 people by 7 p.m., which was 2,000 more than the permit covered. And nobody was checking permits tonight. The screens on the tower's exterior face, 3 stories tall. One per side ran a countdown in Vought blue. Vendors worked the crowd with glow sticks and foam eagles and small American flags on wooden sticks. The same kind the man on the corner of 9th and 46th had sold out of a duffel bag 3 days ago, which felt like a different era now. Inside on the 41st floor, Ashley was running her 5th check of the broadcast delay system. 12 seconds, the tech confirmed. Live to air 12-second buffer. Anything goes wrong, we cut to the package before it reaches the satellite. What's in the package? Prepared remarks. Homelander 3 minutes pre-recorded this afternoon. Flags, music. Ends on the Eagle logo. Ashley looked at the monitor showing the plaza crowd. 4,000 faces tilted up at a screen counting down to something they'd been told to want. And the deepfake team, standing by. We have 2 versions pre-rendered. Homelander subduing the subject in, the tech paused, a version where the subject doesn't appear at all. Clean event, no incident. Which one do we lead with if we have to use it? Your call. Ashley looked at the countdown. 6 minutes. Neither. She didn't look away from the monitor. We use whichever one matches whatever actually happens out there. I'm not guessing twice tonight. She walked to the window. Below, the crowd shifted and breathed like one organism. On the stage at the plaza's center, raised 6 feet, lit from 4 angles, camera positions, marked and staffed. The host was doing his pre-show check. Earpiece, teleprompter. The particular stillness of a man who knows his lines and is waiting for his cue. Homelander had not yet emerged from the green room. In the van parked on a service road behind the tower's north face, Frenchie had the uplink frequency isolated and was recording everything that touched it. Incoming, outgoing, the handshake signals between the tower's broadcast array and the satellite overhead. He had a device that looked like a thermos and functioned as a passive tap. It was technically 17 kinds of illegal. If they cut to the package, Frenchie kept his eyes on the frequency display. We lose the live signal, but we keep whatever we've already buffered. That's the raw. That's what matters. was watching the plaza through a camera mounted on the van's roof. How many people down there? 4,000, give or take. How many of them have phones? Frenchie looked at him. All of them. Right. watched the crowd. So whatever happens on that stage happens in 4,000 pockets simultaneously. Vought can strike the uploads, but they can't strike the devices. He sat back. This one's different from the live show. That was a controlled environment. This is open air. Butcher was reading a schematic of the tower's lower levels on his laptop, the maintenance corridors, the server room locations, the emergency exit routes. He had been reading it for 40 minutes. We're not here for the show. Butcher didn't look up from the schematic. We're here for what happens after, which is... Butcher looked up. She's going to do something to that building tonight. I don't know what. But she walked past a 6-man response unit this morning like they were landscaping. He closed the laptop. When she moves, we move with her. Not with her behind her. Through whatever she opens up. Kimiko was already watching the tower's service entrance through the van's side window. She hadn't looked away in 20 minutes. The host announced, "Ladies and gentlemen," into a microphone that carried his voice to every screen in a 12-block radius and 4,000 people in the plaza, and an estimated 11 million watching at home via VN. N did the thing crowds do when they've been told something significant is about to happen. They got quiet in the specific way that means they're ready to be told what to feel. Homelander walked out from stage left. The cheer that followed was the kind that travels up through the soles of your feet if you're standing anywhere near it. The screens on the tower face cut to a close-up, his jaw, the eagle at his shoulder, the cape moving in a breeze that the lighting crew had manufactured with a fan, positioned just off camera. He raised one hand. The cheer went up another register. He stood at the podium for a moment without speaking, which was always the most effective part. The silence carried its own message. I don't need the crowd. The crowd needs me. 3 days ago, he began in the voice that sounded like it had been built in a factory specifically for this. Someone told me this country was afraid. He looked out at the plaza. I told them not on my watch. The crowd responded. On cue or close enough. There are people who want to destabilize what we've built here. People who don't want order. Who don't want safety. A pause calibrated. Who don't want us? His eyes went to the camera, the main one, the one feeding the 11 million. I want you to know I see them. And I'm not going anywhere. The cheer again. Longer this time. In the control room above the plaza, the director watched 4 camera feeds and the uplink meter and the 12-second buffer indicator all at once. Everything was green. The delay was holding. The crowd was behaving exactly as 4,000 people told to attend a free event on a Thursday night tend to behave. He was looking at feed 3 camera left covering the stage from a low angle when something moved at the edge of the frame that wasn't in the blocking. He leaned forward. She came from the right side of the stage. Not stage right, the actual right side from a direction that wasn't a designated entrance past a barricade that had been rated for crowd control and had failed at a different application entirely. She walked up the steps at a pace that suggested she had been there before and found it unremarkable. The host saw her first. His face did what faces do when the thing happening in front of them doesn't match any prepared category. He stepped back from the microphone. Homelander heard the crowd shift before he turned. The crowd had a new sound, not the cheer and not the silence. Something between them, the sound of 4,000 people trying to process two things at once. He turned. She stopped at the edge of the stage lights at the boundary between the lit area and the dark behind it. The glasses caught the light. The Umbra watch sat still against her sternum. She looked at the crowd, then at Homelander, then at the main camera. The same gesture as the VNN studio. The same 2 seconds, the same quality of informing the camera that she was aware of it and it should be aware of her. Then she walked to the microphone the host had vacated. "Hi." Into the microphone, the word carried to 12 blocks and 11 million. In the control room, someone called "cut to package," and someone else answered "hold." And neither of them had the authority to overrule the other, which meant the buffer ran and the live feed stayed live. And 11 million people watched Homelander and Bayonetta share a stage for the first time. And Homelander moved toward her. Not fast would look desperate on camera. He moved the way he always moved in public, with the measured confidence of a man who owns the floor he's walking on. "You weren't invited?" Low at a volume meant to carry without the microphone. Neither were the cameras. She glanced at the 4,000-person plaza. And yet, he stopped beside her, close enough for the camera to read it as confrontation. "You're making a mistake. You keep saying that." She looked at him the way she'd looked at the lobby fruit arrangement in the green room 3 days ago, with a kind of mild, impersonal assessment. "Has it worked yet?" The crowd noise dropped another register. 4,000 people had collectively decided to stop talking. Homelander's jaw tightened in a way that the close-up camera on Feed 2 caught, and the 12-second buffer held, and the control room watched, with the stillness of people observing a car accident they cannot stop. "Last chance." He held her gaze. "Walk off this stage." "After you." He moved. Not the measured public walk, the real one. The one that crossed 15 feet in under a second and arrived with enough force to rearrange the stage setup around him. She was not where she had been. The lectern was, part of the podium assembly. Several things that had been on the podium were now distributed across the stage in a way that suggested considerable force had passed through the area very recently. Homelander stood in the middle of it, his hand still extended toward a point in space that was no longer occupied. He turned. She was at the other side of the stage. She hadn't used the microphone again, but the plaza was quiet enough that her voice carried to the first 20 rows. "Your form's better on TV." Bayonetta from across the stage. The close-up camera caught his eyes going red at the edges. The buffer held this too. In the control room, the director was very still. The laser, when it came, was not aimed at her, or rather it was aimed at where she had been, which was a distinction that had been becoming increasingly meaningful over the last several days. It crossed the stage at the speed lasers travel and hit the lighting rig above the camera position where she had been standing, which was no longer where she was standing, and 3 of the 4 stage lights went out, and the rig came down at an angle that cleared the camera crew by approximately 4 feet. The crowd did not cheer this time. The crowd made the sound crowds make, when something that was supposed to be a performance has become something else. Homelander looked at the fallen rig, at the camera crew regrouping, at the 11 million indicator on the uplink still green, still live, the buffer still running. She moved. Someone in the control room noted unnecessarily. "I can see that," the director replied. "We need to cut." "If we cut now, the last thing on air is him firing at the stage." Nobody spoke for 2 seconds. "Hold," the director said. "Keep it live." On the stage, Homelander was doing the thing he was worst at recalibrating in public. The crowd had split. The half nearest the fallen rig was moving back phones, up the instinct to document, overriding the instinct to flee. The other half had gone still, the specific stillness of people who aren't sure if what they're watching is scripted. He straightened, fixed the cape. The face went back to the public setting, composed, certain in command. He was very good at this. It was possibly the thing he was best at. Stay calm. Loud enough for the nearest cameras. This is under control. From across the stage. Is it? He turned. She was leaning against the upright portion of the fallen rig arms, crossed, looking at him with the expression she'd used on the PR woman in the green room. Not contempt exactly, more like the complete absence of a reason to pretend otherwise. You're going to want to be very careful, he said low and level. You shot at your own lighting equipment. She tilted her head. In front of 11 million people. I'm not the one who needs to be careful. The red was back in his eyes. The full version this time, not the edge, the actual color. The one that in 4 years of VNN coverage had only appeared twice, and both times had preceded something that required significant post-production management. He crossed the stage. She moved. What followed was 20 seconds that the camera recorded from 6 angles. 4 official VNNN positions, one on a camera operator's shoulder rig, who had kept rolling by instinct, and one on a phone belonging to a woman named Patricia Osei, Derek's mother, who had come to the plaza because her son had told her to watch. And she had a good angle from the 3rd row. The 20 seconds showed Homelander moving. Homelander not connecting. Homelander's cape ending up somewhere it hadn't started, a section of stage railing, departing the stage at speed. Homelander firing twice more and hitting things that were not her. And Homelander arriving at the back edge of the stage with the expression of a man who has just realized the math of a situation is not what he assumed. Patricia Osei's phone uploaded automatically to her cloud backup. In the control room, cut now. The uplink went to the package. Flags, music, pre-recorded Homelander jaw set saying words that no longer matched anything happening in the real world 41 floors below. The 12-second buffer when the VNN legal team reviewed it later contained 19 seconds of footage they could not broadcast, could not satisfactorily deepfake, and could not claim hadn't happened because it had happened in front of 4,000 witnesses with 4,000 phones. And by the time the uplink cut to the package, 847 uploads were already in progress across 6 platforms. Vought's strike team got 412 of them in the first hour. The other 435 were already distributed beyond traceable reach, and Patricia Osei's automatic cloud backup was not on any list because nobody had thought to get Derek's mother's name into the system, which was the kind of operational gap that seems obvious afterward. By midnight, the clip, all 6 angles, edited together by someone with a good eye and 40 minutes of free time, had been viewed 2.3 million times. The comments were split, as they always were. But the split was different this time. Before, it had been roughly even. Now it was running 3-1, and the 1 was working harder. Backstage in the service corridor that ran behind the stage structure, Frenchie was connected to a junction box that should not have been accessible from outside the tower's primary network, and was because the service entrance had a secondary panel that the maintenance manual listed as auxiliary, and Frenchie had read the maintenance manual. He was copying the buffer. The full 19 seconds uncompressed every angle the official cameras had captured before the cut. 2 minutes. Quietly into the comms. You have 90 seconds, Butcher replied. Response units are moving toward the stage. Then I have 90 seconds. MM was at the service entrance watching the corridor. Huey was at the junction box with Frenchie holding the connection steady, while the copy ran, which was not a technical job but was an available job, and Huey had learned to take available jobs. How bad was it? Huey asked. He hadn't been able to see the stage from their position. He fired 3 times. Frenchie watched the progress bar. Missed 3 times. At her, at where she was. Frenchie looked up briefly. There's a difference. The copy finished at 87 seconds. Frenchie disconnected. They were out the service entrance at 89. On the plaza, the screens on the tower face were running the package flags. Music, the pre-recorded address, and a significant portion of the 4,000 people who had come to watch a show were watching something else on their phones instead. Security was moving through the crowd, which was the standard procedure. But the crowd had the dispersed, self-directing quality of people who have already decided what they think and are sharing it. One side of the plaza was still, the other was moving. Between them in the center, the stage stood, with its fallen rig and its departed railing, and its 3 dead lights lit now only by the ambient glow of the tower screens, running footage of a man saying things that no longer applied to the night anyone had just experienced. Bayonetta stood at the far edge of the plaza, at the boundary where the crowd thinned out and the street began. She looked at the tower, the screens the height of it, the Vought logo at the apex, catching the city light. Boring. To the tower, or to the logo, or to no one. Then she walked north toward the address she had identified from the command unit's buffer drives 3 days ago. The server infrastructure, the PR architecture, the system that had been running the narrative since the morning the drawer opened. The thing behind the screens. She had been patient with the screens. She was done with the screens. The curfew order went out at 10 p.m. Via emergency alert. Every phone in a 30-block radius buzzed simultaneously with a message that read, Authorized Response Initiative, curfew in effect. Remain indoors. Comply with all directives from deputized personnel. The text was white on red. Someone in the graphic design department had been waiting to use that color combination. By 10:04, the streets around Vought Tower were lined with vehicles that were not quite military and not quite police, and occupied a legal category that the ARI had invented specifically to avoid defining. Barricades. Floodlights pointed outward from the tower's perimeter. 3 helicopters in a holding pattern at 800 feet, their spots sweeping the plaza, where 4 hours ago 4,000 people had watched Homelander miss a target 3 times on live television. In the VNN studio, 3 blocks north, a stand-in anchor was reading from a teleprompter. Vought International, in coordination with Federal Emergency Management, has confirmed an ongoing terror event in the Midtown area. Residents are advised to shelter in place and avoid all contact with unidentified individuals. This is an evolving situation. The Chiron read terror attack on American soil. In the 31st floor PR suite, Ashley was on 4 calls simultaneously, which was 2 more than the headset was designed for, and 1 more than any human being should be expected to manage. The tower's server team had been given the order 40 minutes ago. If the building's structural integrity became compromised, the archive drives were to be physically destroyed before evacuation. The PR archive, the deepfake render library, the detention logs, the Category 7 filings, all 47 of them. Don't destroy the originals, Ashley said into the primary line because she had worked at Vought long enough to know that the originals were the only thing that could save you when everything else was being used against you. Encrypt and off-site. There's a difference. She looked at the window, at the floodlights below and the barricades and the helicopters. She's coming here, she said. Not to anyone on the calls, just to the window. She was always coming here. She came from the south on foot down the center of 6th Avenue, which had been cleared by the curfew and the barricades and the general understanding that the center of 6th Avenue was not a place to be tonight. The floodlights from the tower perimeter caught her at 3 blocks out, and held her there, a single figure walking at the pace of someone who has somewhere to be and considers the distance between here and there an administrative detail. The helicopters repositioned. The spotlights on two of the vehicles tracked and converged. She walked. The first line of response, 8 deputized soups in a staggered formation. The standard sweep they'd been drilling since the ARI went active moved to intercept at 1 block out. 8 people who had in the last 72 hours processed a significant amount of information about what happened to the people who had tried this before them. They tried it anyway. Credit where it's due. What followed was 40 seconds that the helicopter camera caught from above, a wide angle, the kind that makes people look small. 8 figures converging on one. Then a series of positions that didn't track linearly, the kind of movement that looks from altitude like a film strip with frames removed. Then 7 of the 8 figures in new locations they hadn't chosen. And the 8th backing toward the barricade with a specific body language of someone revising their assumptions in real time. She didn't stop walking. The barricade itself, crash-rated vehicle grade, the kind they use at presidential events, lasted approximately 4 seconds. Not because she hit it hard, because she hit it at exactly the angle where it would fold rather than hold, which is a different kind of knowledge than strength. Inside the tower in the Security Operations Center on Sub-Level 2, the feeds from 47 cameras showed the perimeter failing in sequence. The operations chief was on the line with Ashley. Ashley was on the line with the server team. The server team was implementing the encrypt and off-site protocol while simultaneously arguing about whether off-site meant the backup facility in New Jersey or the cloud architecture in a jurisdiction that hadn't signed the ARI. "She's in the building," the operations chief reported. "Which floor?" "She just entered." "We don't..." A pause. "We've lost cameras on sub-level 1. Ashley looked at the ceiling, which was also, from a certain perspective, a floor. Locked down the elevator banks, all of them. Every stairwell door already done. Then what's she using? Nobody answered, because the answer was becoming visible on the remaining camera feeds in a way that was difficult to categorize as using anything. She was moving through the tower's infrastructure, the way water moves through infrastructure, not by overpowering it, but by finding the geometry that it hadn't considered. On floor 3, a camera went dark. Then floor 7. Then 12. The demon appeared at the 41st floor, not from inside the tower. From outside it, from the air, outside the window of the leadership interface space, where 2 days ago Homelander's hand had closed on nothing, and a crack had appeared in the glass. The glass was still cracked. The demon arrived through the crack's general vicinity, which is to say, it arrived through the wall, and the wall's opinion on this was irrelevant. It was large. The word large doesn't do much work here, but it's the available word. Large in the way that makes the 41st floor of a skyscraper feel like a reasonable location for something that size to exist. It had the quality of a thing that was not native to the physics of the room and was not trying to pretend otherwise. Bayonetta stood in the center of the floor. The Umbra watch on her sternum was the source of the thing, or the conduit for it, or both. The contract made visible the partnership that had nothing to do with luck and everything to do with the kind of work that leaves marks. She was not straining. She was the way she always was, precise, attentive, exactly where she meant to be. "Here's the thing about symbols," she said to no one in particular, in the tone of someone observing a fact. "They only work if the building's still standing." The demon moved. The 41st floor ceased to be a floor in the conventional sense. What it became instead was a point of transition between what the tower had been an hour ago and what it would be classified as in the structural reports filed the following week. The exterior wall went first, opening a 40-foot section to the city air, then the floor above, then the two below, in a sequence that the engineering assessment would later describe as cascading structural compromise initiated from a single point of extraordinary force. Outside, the helicopters broke formation. The spotlight operators trained for crowd control and pursuit did not have a protocol for this. En vie. NN. The stand-in anchor stopped reading from the teleprompter and looked at the feed from the tower camera. The one on the building across the street, the one that was still running and said live on air without checking with anyone. Oh my God. The chyron updated automatically to the next item in the queue, which happened to be Vought International Strength Safety America. In the PR suite on the 31st floor, the ceiling cracked along two lines that met at an angle suggesting the load above had redistributed. Ashley looked at the crack, looked at her phone, looked at the 4 open call lines, 2 of which had gone silent. "Get out," she said to the room. "Take the stairs, west side, now." People moved. Ashley stayed. She had the laptop open and was transferring the last of the encrypt and off-site queue. Not because she thought it would matter, but because the work was the work, and she had not survived this long by stopping before the job was done. The ceiling cracked further. A panel fell. She closed the laptop, tucked it under her arm, and walked to the stairs. The boys entered through the service tunnel on the tower's east side, the one that connected to the basement of the parking structure, the one that the operations chief had locked and that Frenchie had unlocked from the junction panel outside in approximately 90 seconds. 12 minutes, Butcher said, before the structure is too compromised to be inside. How do you know 12 minutes? Huey asked. I don't. I'm estimating based on the sound. He looked at the ceiling, a deep tectonic groan the kind buildings make when they are reconsidering their commitments. Move. They moved to the server room on sub-level 2, the one the operations team had been in the process of evacuating when the 41st floor had announced its new configuration. The door was open. The room was empty except for 2 server racks that hadn't been included in the evacuation priority list, and a terminal that had been left logged in because the person logging in had received the get-out directive and had prioritized accordingly. Frenchie went to the racks. MM went to the terminal. Kimiko stood at the door and watched the corridor, the way she watched everything with the total attention of someone who has learned that the moment you stop watching is the moment something uses that. Detention records, MM said, reading the terminal. Full archive. Not just the last 72 hours going back 8 months. He looked at Butcher. This is everything. Every Section 14 order they've ever filed. Copy it. Already copying. MM looked at the progress. 90 seconds. Frenchie had the physical drives out of the rack and into a bag. The render archive is here too. The deepfake library, source files. Take all of it. I am taking all of it. The ceiling groaned again, a different register this time, the one that means the problem has moved closer. Kimiko turned from the door and made a sharp gesture time. 60 seconds, MM said. 40 tum. Butcher replied because the sound had changed again. They were out in 38. Since Homelander arrived on what remained of the 41st floor from the outside, he flew. Because the interior access points had become structurally creative and landed in the open section, where the wall had been, and looked at what was left of the leadership interface space, and at the demon that occupied most of it, and at Bayonetta standing in the center with the attentiveness of someone watching a demonstration go according to plan. He looked at the crack in the remaining glass, the one that had been there since the first meeting. Stop, he said. One word. the voice he used when he expected the word to be enough. She looked at him. The demon behind her was not a thing that stopped on someone else's word. It was operating on a different contract entirely. "You're going to burn this city down," Homelander said. "Your city was already burning." She tilted her head at the remaining window and the floodlights below and the helicopters that had repositioned to a more conservative altitude. "I just changed what was on fire." He moved. The full version, not the public walk, not the measured crossing the actual top speed, the one that had ended every confrontation he'd ever been in before this week. Across the remaining floor through the open air of where the wall had been toward her. The demon's arm moved first. It was not a complicated action. It was the action of a very large thing intercepting a fast-moving, smaller thing, which in physics terms is a matter of mass and positioning. Homelander hit the demon's arm at full velocity, and the demon's arm did not move, and Homelander did in the direction that the arm redirected him, which was sideways and then down, through what had been the floor of the leadership interface space and into the 40th floor of what had been a Vought conference room. The ceiling of the conference room from below now had a Homelander-shaped impression in it. He was not dead. He was not that easy to kill, and she had not been trying to kill him. But he was also not for the moment a factor, and in the economy of this particular evening that was sufficient. She looked at the demon. The demon looked at whatever demons look at. The contract held. She walked to the open section of wall and looked out at the city, the helicopters repositioning again, the floodlights, the camera on the building across the street. That was still running the VNN feed, that was now showing the tower from 4 angles because 3 other news organizations had scrambled cameras when the wall came off, and Vought no longer controlled the only uplink. Below in the streets, people who should have been inside under curfew were not inside. They were at windows, on fire escapes, in doorways, watching, filming. It was the thing Vought had spent a week trying to prevent, a moment that was happening in too many places at once to be managed. She watched it for a moment. Then she dismissed the demon, not dramatically, not with ceremony, just the end of the contract, the way the end of any professional engagement concludes, and walked back through what remained of the 41st floor toward the stairs. She had been patient with the tower. She was done with the tower. In the VNN studio, the stand-in anchor was no longer reading from the teleprompter because the teleprompter had stopped updating, and nobody in the control room was updating it because everyone in the control room was watching the tower feed. The Chiron, still on automatic, cycled through its queue and landed on one that had been scheduled for a segment that was not going to air tonight. Homelander protecting what matters. It ran for 40 seconds before anyone noticed and changed it. By then, it had been screenshotted 11,000 times.
Okay, so we finally got the big tower attack and it did not disappoint. She literally summoned a fucking giant monster and ripped a whole floor of the Vought building wide open. I love this part most when Homelander tried to rush her at full speed and the monster just swatted him through the floor. Meanwhile, Butcher and his crew managed to steal all of the secret illegal files right under their noses, while the building was falling apart. Everything is burning down, but the real fight is just starting with all those leaked files. I really wonder what will happen to Homelander now that his biggest secrets are out. Tell me your thoughts in the comments below.
By 6 in the morning, the smoke was visible from New Jersey. Not dramatic smoke, not the movie kind that rises in a single column and means something. The kind that comes from many small fires in many small locations, the cumulative output of a night when a significant number of people had decided that the rules governing public behavior had been suspended and had acted accordingly. 3 blocks from the wreckage of Vought Tower, a CVS was missing its front windows. 6 blocks north, a group of people in Homelander shirts were arguing with a group of people who had spray-painted something over the Vought logo on a bus shelter. And the argument had moved past words 2 minutes ago. A deputized soup in full ARI vest was standing at an intersection watching both groups with the posture of someone who had been given authority and a mandate and no practical guidance on what either of those things meant when applied to a situation like this. He picked the closer group to approach. This was not a decision based on threat assessment. It was a decision based on proximity, which is how a lot of decisions get made in the absence of actual leadership. VNN was back on air with a new anchor, not the stand-in from last night, a different one. Someone senior, someone whose presence communicated gravity and continuity reading from a statement that had been drafted by the surviving members of VOT's legal and communications teams between 2 and 4 a.m. In the wake of last night's coordinated terror attack on American infrastructure, Federal Emergency Management has authorized an expanded response protocol. All deputized personnel remain active. Citizens are reminded that the authorized response initiative remains in full effect. Anyone with information regarding the identity or whereabouts of the individual designated Category 7 is urged to contact. The phone number that followed had been registered the previous evening. It was already receiving calls. Most of them were not useful. Several of them were people reporting their neighbors. The safe house smelled like coffee and the specific anxiety of people who have been awake for 22 hours and have run out of the kind of adrenaline that makes 22 hours feel manageable. The drives were on the table. 3 of them: the detention archive, the deepfake source library, the buffer copy from the Plaza broadcast. Frenchie had a laptop open and was working through the detention archive with the focused expression of someone who expects to find things they won't enjoy finding. 8 months, MM said. He was standing at the window, not looking at anything in particular. 412 Section 14 orders. 61 people still listed as processing as of last night. He turned from the window. Processing means we don't know where they are. We know where 3 of them are, Frenchie said without looking up. Same facility as Derek. Cross-reference the intake logs. Can we get them out? The facility lost comms last night when the tower went down. Could mean the guards left. Could mean they locked everything and left. Frenchie looked up. We won't know until someone goes. Butcher was sitting at the table with his coat still on, which was his version of being ready to move. He looked at the drives, at the laptop, at the window, and what was visible through it, smoke distance a city that had spent the night deciding what it was going to do with itself and had not yet finished deciding. We got what we came for, he said. Did we? Huey was leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, the posture of someone who has a point they've been sitting on for several hours. Vought Tower is rubble. Homelander is somewhere. 61 people are still missing. And out there, he gestured at the window. The deputized soups are still deputized. The ARI is still active. Whoever survives the next 48 hours of internal Vought politics is going to pick up exactly where Ashley left off. Except now, they get to call it rebuilding instead of controlling. Nobody argued with this. The difference, MM said after a moment, is we have the archive. We have the deepfake source files. We have 412 orders with names and dates and signatures. He looked at the table. That's a federal case. That's congressional testimony. That's the kind of thing that takes 2 years and burns a lot of people who thought they were insulated. He paused. It's not fast, but it's what we have. Kimiko had been sitting on the floor against the wall in the position she occupied when she was thinking rather than watching. She looked up now, made a gesture, both hands open, slow and deliberate, like something spreading outward from a point. Frenchie watched her, translated without prompting. She says it doesn't end here. Whatever this was, it was one version. The next version is already being written. Kimiko nodded, then added one more gesture, a single finger pointing at the table, at the drives. That's why we keep the drives, Butcher said. He stood. And why we make copies tonight. Multiple. Different locations. He picked up his coat, then realized he was already wearing it, which was the kind of thing that happened at hour 22. We go again tomorrow. He walked to the door, stopped with his hand on the frame. Different war, he said. Same bother. He left. After a moment, the others followed. The congresswoman who had received the drives 3 days ago, the ones Bayonetta had left at the NYCLU office, was on a call at 7 a.m. with 2 federal prosecutors and a journalist she trusted, which was a short list. The journalist had the buffer copy from the plaza. The prosecutors had questions about the detention archive. The congresswoman had the deepfake source files and a committee hearing scheduled for 3 weeks from Thursday. 3 weeks was a long time. It was also not very long depending on what you were measuring against. She looked at the file names on the drive, at the timestamps, at the signatures on the Section 14 orders. Each one a name, each name a decision, each decision a person who had decided that the machinery was more important than what it ground up. She opened a new document and started writing questions, the kind that don't have comfortable answers. She was on the roof of a building 8 blocks north of the wreckage. When the sun came up, which meant she was the first thing in the immediate vicinity to be lit by it. The city below was doing what cities do after bad nights, moving cataloging damage, trying to locate itself relative to where it had been the day before. Sirens. A news helicopter making passes over the site. The smell of smoke and the particular silence of streets that are occupied, but cautious. She looked at it for a moment. At the smoke and the helicopter and the screens visible through apartment windows, running the new anchor's new statement on a loop. Frenchie had been wrong about one thing: she had not left immediately after the tower. She had walked 8 blocks north and climbed a fire escape and sat on a roof while the city processed its night, because she had found, in the course of this particular engagement, that cities were worth watching when they were deciding what they were. This one was still deciding. A sound below a deputized soupe working his way through the block, checking doorways, doing the job he'd been given, in the way people do jobs when the institution behind the job has just had a very bad evening, but the paperwork is still technically in force. He looked up, saw her on the roof. His hand went to the comm on his shoulder. She looked at him. He did not press the comm. He looked at her for another moment, then continued down the block, checking doorways. She watched him go. Below on the street, 2 people who had never met were arguing about last night. One insisting the tower had been attacked by a foreign agent, one insisting it had been a controlled demolition, staged by Vought itself, both of them working from the same set of images and arriving at conclusions shaped entirely by what they'd already believed when they woke up yesterday morning. Neither of them was going to change their mind. The argument would end when one of them walked away and would resume with someone else later in the day, and would continue in various forms for months until it was displaced by the next thing. This was not a failure of information. This was not a failure of evidence. The drives existed. The archive existed. The buffer copy existed. Patricia Osei's cloud backup existed, and the clip from Mrs. Ewan's kite store security system, and the 47 independent uploads that had survived the strike campaign, and the 6-angle compilation that had 2.3 million views and was climbing. The evidence was there. It had always been a question of whether evidence was the point. She looked at the city for another moment. Then she stood and stretched and picked up the bag she'd set down when she climbed up. Was down there somewhere with his drives and his contact in the city clerk's office and his 2 years of patience. Butcher was somewhere making copies. Frenchie was somewhere translating Kimiko's silence into something the rest of the world could use. She did not know any of them well enough to have an opinion about their chances, but she had watched them work, and they were the kind of people who understood that the machinery outlasts any single operator, and that the answer to machinery is not a bigger machine but a longer memory. She had done what she came to do, which was depending on how you counted either very little or quite a lot. You people really love your icons. To the city, or to the smoke, or to no one in particular. I just changed the stage. She picked up the bag, walked to the fire escape, descended. At street level, she turned south, away from the wreckage, away from the news helicopter, away from the two people still arguing about what last night had meant. She had her own things to get back to. Hunts, contracts. The particular discipline of an Umbra witch operating in whatever world she found herself in, which was, as worlds went, not the strangest she'd encountered, merely the loudest. Cheer at 8:47, AMVNN broke from the new anchor's statement for a special segment. The graphic was different from the red on white of the curfew alert. It was blue and gold, which were Vought's colors, but also the design team had noted the colors of authority and trust and institutional legitimacy, and the brief had specified all three. The chyron read, "Introducing the Authorized Hero Registry, Vought's next chapter." A spokesperson who was not Ashley. Ashley was in a car heading to a location she had not disclosed to anyone at Vought, and did not intend to explain that in the wake of last night's events, a new framework for soup registration and oversight would be implemented. Registered heroes, vetted, accountable, safe. The spokesperson used the word transparency 4 times. The phone number for the tip line, now rebranded as the Hero Registry Hotline, appeared at the bottom of the screen. In an apartment 6 blocks away, Derek Osei watched the segment from his couch with his phone in his hand, and the original uncompressed file of his 17-second clip still in his cloud backup, waiting. He looked at the spokesperson, at the chyron, at the phone number. He looked at his phone. He started typing.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and be sure to turn on notifications so you won't miss our future videos. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.